Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends and family. Welcome back once again to the Abundant Way Ministries Empowerment Series.
Good evening, everyone.
I love that little song. I found me a new song.
Oh my gosh. Feeding the ducks.
It's called Feeding the Ducks. Who would have thunk that
Who would have thought?
Feeding the Ducks would be my jam.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome back. We are still in our overcoming economic empowerment, overcoming economic oppression series. And I want to do a quick check to make sure that we are not having technical difficulties. I see somebody on the line. I don't know who it is, but if you are out there and you are tuned in and you can hear us, please let us know.
We are heard.
We are heard. Thank you very much. I'm not so sure.
Why you say that?
Because I don't see my mouse.
It's right there.
Yeah, but it's not connected.
Oh, well,
Anyway.
we on.
Anyway,
I can hear us.
Okay, you can hear us. So we
Yeah.
got comments on?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are in our third episode of Overcoming Economic Oppression, and building generational wealth. That means you have to embrace prosperity. And we've had some exciting sessions up until today, and today will be no different. We have been going in. I don't know if we have our 2 live crew with out there yet. We've got our Bible scribe, Mahogany. We've got YouTube fixed, by the way, Mahogany, if you're out there. So you can chat with us via YouTube. We encourage you guys to type in your comments because we want this to be an interactive session. Because we want you. Hey, I see you, Mahogany. I see you out there. We want you guys to get everything that you can get out of this session. All right. So we got 3 things that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to hit them real quick. We're going to talk about breaking the cycle of debt and poverty. We've always said that there is that poverty is a spirit. You know, poverty is a mindset. It's a spiritual thing. It before it hits your pockets, poverty hits your mind. It hits your spirit. It hits you from inside your culture. It hits you from inside your family household, your family dynamics. And when we talk about the generational curse of poverty, it's not in your blood. Like, it's not in your DNA to have to struggle with poverty. I think in one session you heard me talk about poverty as a place that some of us have to walk through at some point in time in our life. The unfortunate dilemma is when you walking through it, some people stop and stay far too long, right? Why do I say that poverty is a place? Because when Jesus told his disciples, "The poor you should have with you always," in Matthew chapter 26, I believe, verse 11. And then we discovered that in Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 11, that Jesus was only quoting what Moses had gotten from God. And he said the same exact words, "The poor you should have with you always." And my dilemma, my personal dilemma, well, if that's the case, why are we trying to fight a war against poverty? And God has already said poverty ain't going nowhere. But what I realize is that it's not meant for poverty to go anywhere. It's meant for us to help people get through it. So that's why I say it's a place that you might travel through. We want to help see you get through it, overcome it, go around it. And that's what this is all about. And we want to do it on a big scale. The only way we can do this on a big scale is we do have to think generationally, right? There are cycles. There's cycles of debt. There's cycles of poverty. And hey, Robin.
Hey, Robin.
And we've got to have a mindset on how do we break those cycles. Most of those cycles are mental. Those are mental and spiritual cycles. One of the cycles of poverty is debt. Yeah.
Yep, that's a big one.
That's a big one. Because we don't understand debt. Right? So the Bible says in Proverbs 22, verse 7, the borrower is slave to the lender. When we talk about economic empowerment, when we talk about generational wealth, at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is freedom. What we really want is freedom. A lot of us focus on the money, but the money is not the thing. The money is probably a means to an end, but the end destination that we all really want is we want to be free. Right. What I mean by free, I mean financially free. Meaning that you don't live in fear of how you're going to pay your bills. Right?
Because you're going to always pay bills.
Yeah, because bills, bills.
You know, you got to live. So, and it's debt, all debt. We're not talking about the debt of necessity, the debt that you're going to have. If you have a house, you're going to have a mortgage.
Not necessarily.
And well, if you pay it, I mean, if you can pay it off or buy it cash.
So that's what I want to challenge today. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, then what about a car? If you cannot pay it in full and with cash immediately, right?
Understood.
That's what I'm saying.
Understood.
You may start off with some debt. I mean, you're gonna have wherever you live, you're gonna have to pay utilities.
So that's not debt, though.
That's a necessity.
That's a living expense.
Right.
So here's the deal. So Mahogany says cars are bad debt. And so this is what I want to address. This is where that the cycle of generational poverty begins. I'll tell you a story. One time I was out looking for a house for one of my clients, one of my investor clients in California. And I found a house that I knew he would be interested in. I called the seller of the house. It's a little lady, little redheaded lady. And we got to talking. You know, she was a wholesaler. She had a business where she had built her business up wholesaling. And for those of you who don't know what wholesaling is, it's a real estate, it is a real estate technique whereby a person with or without a real estate license can make money as a middleman or middlewoman in her case, by putting an offer on a house low enough that she could sell that contract, put an offer on the house, getting a contract signed at an amount low enough that she can actually sell that contract to another investor. Or she can do what they call a double close, meaning if she can find someone else to buy that house for a higher amount than she has it under contract for, then she catches the money in the middle, right? So she is a wholesaler. Little old lady, red hair. She had a company called Red Top Real Estate. Red Top Realty or something like that, because she was a little old lady with red hair. Anyway, we got to talking, and she asked me what was my goal. And I said, I want to one day be debt free. She said, well, what's stopping you? I said, well, almost debt free. I said, because everybody's going to have a mortgage. She said, will they? And she said, and why is that? Why? And then what she said, why would you accept that in your mind? Mm. You know, in other words, she said, why don't you just sell enough houses so that you don't have to have a mortgage? Mm-hmm. And this is where that cycle comes in, because in my mind, that's all I knew. If you're going to have a house, you're going to have a mortgage. If you're going to have a car, you're going to have a car note. But there are people who don't think like that. Mm-hmm. There are people who think just the opposite. If I'm going to have a house, either I'm going to raise enough money to pay for it cash, or I may start off with a mortgage and then raise the money to pay that thing off as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. Same is true with an automobile. Mm-hmm. But here's the mental cycle that we've gotten caught up in. We've gotten caught up in the idea of taking 30 years to pay for a house. Right. The problem with that is you become a slave to that mortgage company for 30 years, and they make 3 times what the house cost. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, they make 3 times the price of the house. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who have been with us for some time, you heard me say before that there is a difference between the price of a thing and the cost of a thing. Mm-hmm. The price of a house might be $100,000. But if you take 30 years to pay a mortgage on a $100,000 house, you will have paid $300,000 for that house over the 30-year period. Mm-hmm. The cost of that house was $200,000. The price was $100,000. The cost was $200,000. Therefore, you paid $300,000 for a $100,000 house because of the mental cycle of poverty, which said, I'm not going to do anything to shorten the time, right? I'm just going to pay it. I'm just going to pay my mortgage. I'm going to be a slave to the lender for the next 30 years. And so therefore, I have to work for the next 30 years. I have to work. I have to keep my job for the next 30 years. And if the taxes go up and insurance go up, I might have to get a second job and do that for another 30 years. And so we find ourselves getting up, going to jobs that we really don't like, because we're a slave to Bank of America, a slave to Chase, a slave to Wells Fargo. So reality is, as long as you have that mortgage, and look this word up, I dare you, look up the word mortgage and tell me what the etymology of the word is. Oh, shoot. I done hit you with a word. Look at her. She hates when I hit y'all with big words.
The what?
The etymology. Somebody out there knows what etymology means. ETYMOLOGY. Etymology. What does that mean? It is the study of words. It's a word study. So it's, where did that word come from and what does that word really mean? Etymology of a word. Look up the etymology of the word mortgage. It's going to tell you something similar to not debt, but death. It's where you hear the word mortuary. Yes, mahogany. You got it. You got it. That's what I knew it. Mort, means death.
Mm.
That's where you get the word mortuary, right? That's where people who die go before they're married.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that you find yourself in when you have a mortgage. Look up the word. What's the rest of the word mean? Mahogany. What does the gauge part of that word mean? Mortgage. I'm glad you back, Mahogany, because you've been doing good. I don't even have to type as long as you online.
Right.
As long as we got Mahogany, we got words, boy. A death pledge. I'm gonna do this thing till I die. And that's what happens. A lot of people, you think about that retirement concept. That retirement concept says pretty much, I'm going to work this job till I die. Because if you're going to pay a mortgage for 30 years, and then the job says that back in the day, the jobs used to say, well, you can work for us for 30 years before you can not have to work for us anymore. And then they set up that whole time frame based on when they anticipated you dying. That whole retirement system was designed and planned around your anticipated death date. Mm. How many years they thought you would live. So you could retire at 65, but then you really only had another 10 years to live because they estimated the average person was living to be 75. So now you got to stay on this job for 30 years because you got to pay this mortgage for 30 years. Mm. You just made a death pledge. And so now you're a slave to the lender because you got this death pledge. And all I'm saying is, if we change the way we think, we don't have to accept the idea of being financially imprisoned. Yeah, financially bound. Now, what Malibu was talking about is absolutely true. In real life, most people can't afford to pay cash for a house. Mm-hmm. But in real life, that's not all people. Because again, some of my investor clients, that's all they do is buy houses with cash. And you know this to be true. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I get ready to buy an investment property, I borrow their cash. Don't have to go to the bank because they got all this cash. It's in our own mind that we think is impossible, that we put ourselves in that box. Mm-hmm. While other people are really out there buying houses with cash, we're the ones that say we got to go get a mortgage.
Well, yes. We're saying, well, for one, we are making an investment in buying the house, mm-hmm. getting a house instead of renting. So that is an investment, right? But I think what you're trying to say on top of that, okay, you're getting a house, so you're investing in that because eventually that house is going to bring some income, depending on how you use it, right?
Quite possibly,
right. But the other part to that is you go get a house, but the mindset of when you're going to get a house is like, I'm not going to pay this mortgage for 30 years because I've got a game plan that says, okay, while I'm in this house and while I'm paying this mortgage, I've got this over here working for me, this passive income that's working for me, that's going to help me get rid of this debt sooner than later. Mm-hmm. So you always have to have a strategy, especially when you're making a big investment like that. Even with a car, you're like, okay, yep, I'm going to get a car. I don't have the cash to buy it, outright, but I'm going to get a car. But the strategy is, it's not going to take me 6 years to pay for this car.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to, in your figuring out, how you create this passive income. And when you create the passive income with your entrepreneurship and your businesses and whatever else you're doing, then you put it in the strategy and said, okay, while this is happening, I am going to take care of this and this, because the money that I use for the car note and the mortgage, I can take that money and invest it someplace else.
Right. So now you're talking about, how do we break that cycle?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're talking about. How to break that cycle. Because the reality is that many of us, if not most of us, will be in that cycle at some point in time in our life.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, most of our reality is that we don't have that type of cash laying around.
Right.
If the average house today costs $300,000, between $200,000 and $300,000, $400,000, most people, especially most young people, don't have that kind of money saved up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we need a house.
Mm-hmm.
And we need an automobile, right? Which are your two, probably your two biggest expenses
Mm-hmm.
and necessities. So we have to go then get this job, and the jobs were never meant to make you financially free.
Right.
Notice that most jobs only pay you enough to stay in that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
If you left it up to that one job, you would be in that cycle for 30 years. Because like what Mahogany mentioned, most financial experts say get a 15-year mortgage. But if you're trying to go to this one right here, but if your paycheck is not enough, your paycheck is not enough to cover that monthly payment, because if you get a 15-year mortgage, the payment is going to be higher,
Mm-hmm.
and still take care of all of your other bills, then you're forced to take the 30-year because that's all your job pays you. But in breaking that cycle, the thought process is, okay, this is what my job pays me,
Mm-hmm.
but there's nothing that says that my income has to be limited to that.
Exactly.
So what we've been talking about is, what can you do over and above, outside of your 9-to-5 job, to generate extra income?
Mm-hmm.
That, yes, then you can say, I've got extra money that I could put down. I can get the 15-year mortgage. I got extra money that I can pay that principal off quicker.
Mm-hmm.
You feel what I'm saying? And so mentally breaking out of that cycle says that no longer do I think that my job is my savior, or my job is the plan, the financial plan. It's not.
Right. Right. And when going back to when you saying that the poverty mindset, and it comes from your environment, it comes from your upbringing, it comes from the family cycle, and that is a result of only knowing what you see.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up seeing your parents or your grandparents struggling to pay the bills, and struggling to make sure it's food in the house, and struggling to do this, and they only had one source of income.
Right.
That was the job.
Right. And why?
And they fully relied on it, because that's the cycle. That's the generational cycle. That's how they were raised, and how their mother and father and don't so on down the line, and so on. So
wait a minute, let me pause you right there, because I don't want to leave that point.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what they knew.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's passed down from generation to generation.
Right.
Take a family living in the same town, but their family owns businesses, and that's what they know, and that's what they learn, and that's what's passed down from generation to generation. They could live right next door to each other.
Yep.
But experience two totally different realities. And so that's the cycle that we have to break. It's what you pass down from generation to generation. And then watch this. Maybe that's all you saw. But we live in a day and age right now that we're exposed to so much more now. Right? You can see that other people don't live like you. They do things a little different. We can see people in different countries and different lifestyles. And now you get to say, is this all that's available to me?
Yeah.
Or do I stay in this box? Like you ever see horses with those blinders on and the bit in their mouth? Like some of us, that's how we live our life. We don't look to the left or the right, and we're only guided by that bit in the mouth. What did Robin say? Grandma and Grandpa had 2 Cadillacs, a house, an old pickup truck, and 20 hunting dogs, and only work a regular job.
Probably could back in those days.
And Grandma and Grandpa had a garden. They
grew. Yeah.
And Grandpa was a hunter and a fisherman. They pretty much only had to go to the grocery store. Right. And quiet as kept, them hunting dogs, that's income right there.
I was just going to say, so what Grandpa was doing was creating a side income.
Yeah.
Hunting, fishing, growing, your own fruits and vegetables, all that. That's an extra income.
And what she also didn't say is Grandma and Grandpa had a 2-family house, and they rented out the upstairs.
There you go.
Yeah, they weren't done by no means.
So they had the idea. They knew before it was a name on it. Before there was a term for it, they knew, hey, we can bring in some extra money with this and with this. And they probably really wasn't even thinking about it being passive income.
Right.
They was just like, we could sell this.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing right now, having that 2-family house and renting out the upstairs would drastically cut down that biggest expense.
The mortgage.
That mortgage. And also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they owned those cars and those trucks. So they didn't have no car notes.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. In fact, I know that Grandpa sold one of them dogs, Big Red, for a truck.
See. The barter and trade.
Yeah.
So you could do that back in those days.
Yeah.
It was easier to do it back in those days.
Yeah.
But again, it's all in the mindset.
Yeah.
It's all in, this is what I can do.
Let me say this too, because it makes me think about when we talk about the poverty mindset, it really has very little to do with money. Like let's not make the mistake of thinking that a person is rich or poor, wealthy or poor, based on dollar bills.
Yep.
Again, that ingenuity. Yeah. that puts you in a wealthy mindset already.
Right.
Being resourceful
Mm-hmm.
puts you in a wealthy mindset already. Now, one thing I can say about them, they were very resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't out-resource grandma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You wasn't going hungry around her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not at all.
And that's what they had to offer, really.
Yeah. In fact, they had more than enough. Talking about wealth,
Mm-hmm.
because every time anybody came to their house, they loaded your trunk up with food to go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you couldn't get out of there without them giving you bags of food.
Right.
Because they had so much.
Right. Right. Abundance.
They had the abundance.
They took the abundance and they, just like we talked about, they shared it with the community.
Mm-hmm. They had overflow.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They had overflow.
And as long as they kept blessing others, the overflow just kept coming.
Right.
It didn't stop.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about some action. Like, because we started off talking about the death pledge, the mortgage,
mm-hmm.
because that's a reality for most people, and then other debt. So
mm-hmm.
there's the mortgage, there's the car, there's the credit cards, there's the personal loans and lines of credits. All of those debts, those are all not good debts. Even, they'll say your house, oh, that's good debt. It could be considered good debt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a debt that's better than your mortgage. If you have a mortgage on a rental property, that debt is better than the mortgage on the house that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let you do your research on that one. So Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he says as a soundbite
mm-hmm.
that the house you live in is not an asset. Oh, he raised some feathers when he said that.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it intentionally because he wanted to redefine assets and liabilities for us. And his definition was oversimplified. And it went something like this. An asset is anything that puts money into your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
That was his definition. And he said, when you think about assets and liabilities, the house you live in is mostly taking money out of your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to pay that mortgage, you have to pay the light bill, the gas bill, the water bill. You have to do maintenance and repairs.
Insurance.
Yep. And it's not giving you a check on a monthly basis back. Insurance, taxes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not giving. Yeah, you might get a tax deduction or something like that, but it's not an income generator. It has equity in it, but it does not have cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
So because it does not have positive cash flow, he said it's not an asset, it's a liability. Conversely, a rental property that you could have the same mortgage on a property that you rent out to somebody else, because that someone else is paying you rent on a monthly basis. Anytime you have an overage, more money coming in than you have going out. So after the rent is paid, after they give you the rent and after the mortgage is paid, the taxes are paid, the insurance is paid, the maintenance and repairs are paid, the property management is paid. If you have $200 left over, that's an asset.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's putting money in your pocket. And so that debt, that mortgage then becomes good debt. So if we use that definition of assets and liabilities, we understand that, yep, there is some debt that is good. Mm-hmm. Because in the real estate world, we call that leverage, meaning I can buy something of greater value with little money. So if a house costs $100,000, if the price of a house is $100,000, and the bank says, I'll lend you 80% of that, they'll lend you $80,000. And now all you have to do is come up with $20,000. And for that $20,000, you just created yourself a $200 a month income.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're making a return on your investment. While you're making that $200 a month return on your investment, the value of that house is likely appreciating. It's going up in value. So at some time in the future, you may decide to sell that house and you paid $100,000 for it, and your tenants paid the mortgage and all the expenses, and you were getting $200 a month off of it, and then you turn around and sold it for, let's say, $200,000. So you made $100,000 plus the $200 a month for as long as you own that property, and that's why it's an asset. We say, oh, well, my house I live in, that's an asset because it's growing, it's appreciating in value, and it's creating equity. Yeah, that equity can be used as leverage. Yeah, equity can be used as leverage. So we use equity in our house to buy assets, something that's going to generate a positive income,
right?
Positive cash flow, and increase in value. Yeah. So that's, and doing so adds to your income without you having to pick up another job.
Right.
And this is where I'm going with this. I'm taking a long way around the mountain, but I'm walking you through a way that you can get out of this debt, right? Remember, the reason you're in debt is because your job only pays you enough to get by. If they paid you more, you'd be able to pay off that debt. But because they don't, they want to keep you coming back, right? Pay you enough just to keep coming back. You got to figure out how to make money outside of that job so you can accelerate the payoff. Right. So now we're talking about how do you pay off your debt, right? Without picking up another job, a second job, because your time is actually your most valuable asset, right? So what I just described is using the equity in your house as leverage to buy, let's say, a rental property that's creating positive cash flow and increasing in value. So you can use that extra money that rental property is generating and start paying down your debt. You can pay down, you can add that money to your mortgage. You can add that money to your car note. You can use that money to pay off your credit cards. You see what I'm saying? And if you hold that property long enough, let's say it does increase $100,000 over the next 5-10 years, and you decide you want to sell it, you can take that $100,000 and pay off a whole bunch of stuff. Pay your house off, pay your car off, pay all your credit cards off, pay all your loans off. And now, because you don't have debt, you're headed towards financial freedom. And why I say headed towards it and not there yet, yes, you don't have debt. That's a good feeling. You're almost free, but you still need income, right? So that's why you don't want to sell all your rental property, because it's the income. Even if you sold some to pay off all your debt, you have no debt. You still have expenses, the expenses that won't go away, right? No matter what happens, you always going to have taxes, insurance, utilities, food, clothes, healthcare. Those things will never go away. Those are living expenses. So even if you didn't have any debt, house note, car note, credit card bills, you still have those living expenses. So you need something that's going to generate enough money to pay those expenses without you having to go to work. That's when you've hit financial freedom. My Lord, this is good. I just walked through that so smooth, like y'all ain't even see it coming. So now let's think about paying off some debt. Like, people say, yeah, it sounds good, but okay, give me a strategy. So there are a couple of strategies on how to pay off debt, right? Credit card debt. The most popular one is called the snowball strategy. And that snowball could go one of two ways. You can start with the highest one first, or you can start with the lowest one first. You can start with the one that has the highest interest rate first, or you can start with the one that has the lowest interest rate first. People have done it both ways. The main thing is that you do it.
Right.
You do something. Do the one that makes you feel good the fastest. And for most people, that is, let me take care of the low-hanging fruit first. So if I have a credit card that has $1,000 balance and a credit card that has $100 balance, how about I pay off that $100 one first and celebrate that victory? Right? So now you're motivated. See, there's a psychological game that you have to play with yourself too. You see what I'm saying? Because it's no fun to just be paying debt and have no victories to celebrate. So Mahogany said the snowball method she knows about is to pay off the highest interest rates first or the lowest balance first, right? So what I just described is paying off the lowest balance first, because you can celebrate that victory. You've hit something. I'm excited. And now I can take the money that I would have been paying on that lowest one, and now I'm adding it to what I'm paying on the next lowest one. That's doing the snowball from the lowest balance first. The other way, like Mahogany said, is highest interest rate first. You knock that off because the interest rate is what actually keeps you in prison. A lot of people don't understand interest, but that high interest rate, oh my goodness, it becomes harder and harder to pay that thing off. It seems like the higher the interest rate, the further the harder it becomes to pay that thing off. It seems like it gets further and further and further away. So again, psychologically, if you can knock that high interest rate card out, get it out the box, then it stops the bleeding. And now you go down to the next one. Knock the next highest one down, out. Then you go down to the next one, knock the next highest one down, out. Right? But you gotta be disciplined enough to commit yourself to that process and keep it going, because with the snowball part of it means that what you would have been paying on the thing that you just paid off, it doesn't go away. You still take the same amount of money that you would have paid. And now that that's paid off, you take that and you apply it to the next thing. Right? And so now you got two things paid off. You take the money that you would have paid on both of those, now you're applying that to the next thing. And then it becomes faster and faster and faster and faster. And before you know it, you're out of debt. At least credit card debt.
Yeah. Mahogany has a question.
Should we pay off debt first before investing in property? Ooh, that's a good question. I've heard both ways. So theoretically, the order of operations should be first to save your emergency funds first. So let's say an emergency may cost you $1,000 to $2,000. Something that you might have to address because something went wrong, right? Save that first. The next thing is to save 6 to 12 months of your living expenses. In case you lose your job, you got 6 to 12 months to find another job and you'll still be able to pay your bills. Then third is to start paying off your debt. right? But the reality is that the way life works, we may not be always be in a position where all our debt is always paid off all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, it'd be like saving first, pay off your debt second, then invest. But the way life really works, yep, you should go ahead and get them savings in place. But as far as paying off the debt versus investing, those two things you may have to do simultaneously, right? And if you saved right, then you have money to invest with, right? So you can't discount the savings. You can't invest without having some money saved up. You don't have no money to invest with. And again, some of your investments may help you pay off big debt, right? So you don't want to just wait until, how does this sound? I'm going to wait for 30 years to pay off my house before I make my first investment. No. I'm going to wait next 5 years until I pay my car off before I make my first investment. No. Maybe credit cards. You know, it might be a good idea to pay off them credit cards, get those out the way. But the problem is, the way life works, you pay off a credit card this month, 6 months later, something come up and you might have to use that credit card again. Or some people are disciplined enough to only use credit cards as a resource, as a tool, which is how we should be using it. Like, a credit card should not be used because you don't have the money. A credit card should be used as a tool of convenience. So you'll always have that. You know, if you manage credit card debt right, you'll be constantly using your credit card. So you don't want to wait on that before you start investing. You want to make sure you're financially healthy enough, sound enough to be able to do both at the same time. I hope that answered your question. Van Smith, that's my guy, brother.
So wait, you got Michael chiming in here.
Okay, we always gonna live in debt. No, that's what we're talking about. That's the topic for today, Mike. We got to break that mentality, and we got to break that language. We got to come out of that language. His statement was, we always gonna live in debt. So I don't really see how much it would affect your business, as debt already has its hand there as well. So that's a mentality. That's a position that you're taking in your mind, but not everyone thinks that, and not everyone lives that reality. Not everyone says we're always going to be in debt, and we got to start to break that cycle. We got to start in the mind. So I don't know when you joined, Mike, but we did talk about people. You know, I know people right now who don't have that debt. They don't have house notes and car notes and credit card. Your grandfather is one of them, by the way. So no, that's not always true. He's not in debt. So we won't always be in debt. But I need you to come out of that thought mindset.
Right.
Because as long as you think that way, that will be your reality.
Yeah.
When you think in terms of, my goal is to not be in debt, then that will become your reality. Oh, I put Vance's statement up there. Yeah, so Vance he's referring to what I was talking about, how to wisely use credit cards as a tool of convenience. He's also talking about the benefits of being able to use credit cards wisely, cash back. Right? So there are people who are killing the game. I'm talking about they using them credit cards, especially American Express. They're running their whole business on credit cards. Like, they have businesses. Remember your landscaper? He runs his whole business. He has all of his employees, when they get gas, put it on his car. His contractors, put it on the card, put it on the card, put it on the card, and racking up these points. When they go on cruises and vacations, they don't pay nothing. They don't pay for no airfare. They don't pay for no nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah. Got it. Take advantage of that cash back. Right. But you got to be disciplined because they don't carry that debt. They use that card, they pay it off. Right. The reason that they can pay it off because they run a business successfully. Again, if you're doing this based on a 9-to-5 job, it's going to be difficult. That's why, in order to break these cycles, I'm trying to get you all to think about how to generate passive income, generate income outside of a 9-to-5 or in addition to a 9-to-5, right? Because ultimately you really want to get to that place of financial freedom, which means I have more money coming in than I have going out, and I don't have to punch somebody's clock to get it. Let me move on. Oh, yeah. So
move on to where?
Okay, we're gonna go on to, well, we kind of talked about investing, right? Number one, by the way, guys, was breaking the cycle of debt and poverty, and that's us talking about first changing your mindset about whether debt is going to be a forever part of your life or not. That's just a matter of changing your mind. And then once you set your mind on the fact that I don't want to be in debt, I don't have to be in debt. There's nothing that says I have to stay in debt until I die. Once you get that in your mind, your body will start to follow. You start doing things that says, I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. And we start talking about how to pay down that debt strategically. One thing I failed to mention is to avoid those predatory loans, right? Because a lot of times we do use loans as leverage. A loan on a rental property, as I mentioned before, that's good debt. But there are lenders out there who are just out to get your money, and they got some clauses in their contract that are meant to make it a death pledge for you. You can never get out of it.
Payday loans,
right? So avoid those predatory loans. And start hanging around people who think different, and you'll see it. Like so, when I met Red Top, I don't want to say her name because we're on the internet. But when I'll call her Red Top. She put it in my mind that you don't have to have a mortgage, you don't have to have a car note, you don't have to have a student loan debt. Why are you keeping that in your mind? If you're gonna be selling all these houses, why not pay it off? Right. All right. So number 2, invest in ownership, not just income. Right. Deuteronomy, it is he who gives you the power or the ability to produce wealth. Don't just work for money. Let money work for you. We've talked about that. So anybody who only is only going to be sold out to a 9-to-5, you're just working for the money. You may need that 9-to-5 to put yourself in a position where you have saved up enough money to invest, but you have to have that as part of your plan. Right? A big part of it, you said it, is planning. Like, are you planning to be wealthy? Are you just planning to get by? Or do you have a plan at all?
Right.
Do you even care?
Right.
Right? Some people just don't care.
They don't.
Right? They don't see past tomorrow. Right? But for those of you who are on this call, I take it that you see past tomorrow and like, yeah, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Or I see a day coming where I can't do this, but I still need to be able to pay those expenses. So you've got to think ownership, not just income. And that means that you've got to start thinking about different investments like land, property, businesses, and other investments that grow over time. So we're talking about investing in the stock market, right? And we talked about the real estate. Last but not least, number 3, we want to build and transfer. This is the most important of all. Talking about breaking the generational curse of poverty, overcoming economic oppression, The most important thing is to build and transfer knowledge.
Tell it. Just as simple as that.
Yeah. To build and transfer knowledge across generations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you can't tell what you don't know.
Right.
Right? So it's our responsibility to seek out that knowledge. I fuss about this all the time, how so many people have phones and all they do is play games on it and talk on it.
Mm-hmm.
But these phones could be your best tool, because all you got to do is Google, ChatGPT, YouTube, go seek out the knowledge. Don't just take what we're saying here on the Abundant Ways broadcast. Go do some research for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Find a class, find a course on how to invest in stocks, different ways to invest. There's way more ways than just buying a stock and sitting there. There's options, calls and put options. People are making money every day doing options. It doesn't matter whether the stock market is going up or down. There's ways to make money, no matter what it's doing. But you got to increase your knowledge, right? No gatekeeping, right? Transfer that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Bible says in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, my people are destroyed from the lack of knowledge, right? So don't let what you learn stop with you, right? So when you learn how to do something, so I've learned how to invest in real estate. One of Aisha's students called me and asked me, would I allow him to do an intern with me? Yeah.
For real estate?
For IT and real estate. He wants to do both, just like me. Yeah. I talked to him yesterday and today, right? So he's seeking out that knowledge. He's saying, let me find somebody who's already doing what I want to do,
right, and
watch them.
Yep.
There's nothing to stop you from doing that.
Get a mentor.
You got to get the knowledge from somewhere.
Yep.
Right? And then, so now I feel good because I get to pass it on to somebody
and
who
it's
wants
not
it.
limited. And it's not limited just to your family or who you know.
Yeah, no, not at all.
It's whoever you come in contact with, especially if you're already doing what they're trying to do. It becomes so easy. It's really they can see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all you got to do is walk them through the steps that you took. Are the steps you made going to be the same steps that he takes, or is it going to go the same way? May not.
May or may not. Yeah.
But sharing the knowledge, that's what sharing the steps.
Right.
It's a start.
Right. And you got to share your failures too. You gotta share your mistakes and your and where you went wrong, so that they don't go the same way.
Yeah.
And listen, here's the last and final thing in the final minute. Here's what we also have to do. That knowledge part is so important. And that's what we're all about. That's what we're doing with this Abundant Way Ministries, is sharing that knowledge. But watch this. When you become wealthy, or if you become wealthy or not, here's the thing that we have to make sure we do for the next generation. We got to create a will, and we need to do that.
Yep.
Wills and estate plans. And we should document our family lessons. The good and the bad. Document those things that went wrong in your family so that the next generation doesn't have to repeat it. Right. You get what I'm saying?
It's all about breaking the cycle.
And here's the thing, it says mentor the next generation in faith and finances. And that's what we're doing. Yeah, mentoring that next generation. But here's a lot of us don't have wills. We don't have estate plans. If you're in business, you should have a succession plan, like who's going to take over if something happens to you or when you decide to step aside, right? And again, it doesn't have to be your blood relative. It can be whoever God sends, right? Because your daughter or your son may not want to do what you did for a living, right? But if you want to leave a legacy, Again, that's what we've been talking about in the previous sessions, leaving a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what generational wealth is all about. If you want to leave a legacy, then you've got to be able to have a succession plan that lives beyond you. And each one teach one, pass it on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word for the day, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I got.
Each one teach one.
That's it. That's it.
Let me put that in the comments real quick. Each one teach
one. Okay, so that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We want to thank you all for joining.
Thank you, guys. Good session.
Good session.
Good group.
Yeah, I like to see Mahogany as our scribe. I like to see Michael jumping in with his questions, and Robin with her comments, and we even had my godbrother on. Vance. Man, this is awesome. I see 8 people on right now, and cool. That's great. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back. What?
Start working your magic as you're signing off.
Oh yeah. We will be back next Tuesday, and we're gonna wrap it up. We're gonna wrap it up. If anybody out there knows anybody who is a product of generational wealth or is building generational wealth, reach out to them. Let's see if we can get them on the call.
Yeah.
If not, we're gonna just wrap it up. Yep, Robin. Robin said, keep inviting. Yeah, keep inviting people.
Share.
Yep.
Share.
Like it.
Share the knowledge.
Share the knowledge. Until next time, my brothers and my sisters, we will see you next Tuesday. Same time.
He's
Same
trying
session.
to get himself together. Good night, everybody.